So we all know how Nvidia's RTX 4070 turned out, a massive flop. The card failed to meet performance expectations and was severely overpriced, resulting in horrible sales. Despite prices falling below MSRP, people still don't want to get this GPU. But if you thought we had reached the bottom floor with that card, then the upcoming RTX 4060 Ti will not please you one bit. Let's discuss that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. Here I have the Steam Hardware Survey webpage open, and this particular survey data is from March 2023, therefore it's relatively recent. You can see that the recently released RTX 40 series graphics cards are on this list, and they're steadily growing, but not at the rate Nvidia had hoped they would. As we move up the list, you'll find that it's full of previous generation RTX 30 series and RTX 20 series GPUs, with AMD's RX 580 still being their most popular discrete GPU. Long live Polaris, am I right? But as we move up to the top 5 spots, you'll see that in ascending order, we have the Nvidia RTX 3060 Ti, RTX 3070, then the GTX 1060, followed by the RTX 2060 and 3060. So 4 out of the top 5 spots are held by previous generation X60 class GPUs from Nvidia. In one of my previous videos, I discussed how Nvidia touted their X70 series of GPUs to be hugely popular, and they aren't wrong. That mid-range segment has indeed been one of their best sellers, hence we see the RTX 3070 holding the number 4 spot. But I would argue that it's not their most popular segment. That would belong to their X60 series. Now over the past few years, the X60 class has gone up considerably in price like everything else in the market. The GTX 960 had an MSRP of $199, which was fairly entry level back in 2015. Then with Pascal, we got the GTX 1060, which had a pretty significant jump in price to $299 for the 6GB reference model. There was also the cut down 3GB model that sold for $249, but that was Nvidia using more of an upsell tactic. It didn't have the same amount of CUDA cores, but regardless, it still sold decently. But the original 6GB model did also give you a bigger performance jump than what the 960 had offered. Overall, it was received positively by the tech press, performed well at the time, and still holds up decently well today considering where it is on the Steam charts. Then with Turing and the RTX 20 series, we saw a pretty significant jump in price again for all the segments, with the RTX 2060 coming in at $349 US. While your usual tech outlets were praising this card, you still had some calling Nvidia out on their antics, such as AnandTech. The Nvidia GeForce RTX 2060 Founders Edition review. Not quite mainstream. And they were definitely right, because at $349, what was essentially a mainstream GPU had teetered over into the mid-range market. Not super expensive, but also not cheap in the GPU world at that time. And while performance wasn't terrible as it traded blows with the previous gen GTX 1080, due to the higher pricing, the hype that was surrounding the 1060 didn't necessarily carry over in the same way. That's also why Nvidia had released the GTX 16 series with cards such as the 1660 to appease those buyers in the mainstream segment. But again, when you have a segment that's been used to getting a certain level of performance, but you take that away and then give them less for the same price, it definitely leaves a sour taste in your mouth. Then with the RTX 30 series, things got even more weird here, because tech and especially GPUs at the time were in such high demand. Nvidia wanted to raise prices and increase their margins, but also didn't want to make it so blatant, so what we got was the RTX 3060 Ti and the RTX 3060 12GB. Now, despite both of those cards being an X60 class GPU, they were very different, not just in specs, but also in performance. I got a chance to review the 3060 Ti, and I was impressed with it because its performance was on par and traded blows with my overclocked RTX 2080 Super, while being much more efficient. However, I said at that time if you could find it at its MSRP of $399, then it was a decent deal considering the crypto mining boom we were dealing with, and it was just much easier said than done. Now, the RTX 3060, despite having 12 more gigabytes of VRAM, it was a much slower card. It only ended up matching an RTX 2060 Super in regards to performance, so there was around a 20 to 25% gap between the 3060 Ti and 3060. And given what we saw from previous gen X60 class cards, the RTX 3060 Ti was more of a truer successor than the RTX 3060 12GB, which was more so an RTX 3050 Ti. But this wasn't really talked about because pricing was just batshit crazy back then, and also because the 3060 12GB came in at a lower price than the 2060. However, you can see how Nvidia slowly started to increase the pricing over the course of the 6 years and also shifted the performance offerings up a tier. Fast forward to today, and we all know how the RTX 4070 performs. It trades blows with the RTX 3080. Since you now have to jump to an X70s class GPU to attain that level of performance, it should be obvious to you at this point that the upcoming RTX 4060 Ti and 4060 are going to be much slower when it comes to a performance advancement when compared to what we got with previous generation X60 class GPUs. Now, apparently there are some rumors floating around that because the RTX 4070 is selling so poorly, and also because Nvidia is cutting supply, the RTX 4060 Ti is going to launch at around $399 from when it was supposed to originally launch at $499, but I personally feel like that won't happen. I think at most they're going to price it lower at $449, where, like I said, $449 was the original target, but regardless, it's just not worth it either way. In terms of specifications, we already have quite a lot of information that is out there, which confirms where it will land. Recently, there was a leak from MSI's website for some of their pre-built systems listed with the RTX 4060 Ti, and they confirmed that this GPU will have just 8GB of VRAM. Now, I talked about this in my last video, where if you're gaming on an older card with 8GB, it's not that big of a deal because you can just lower down some settings and you'll be fine. What's not okay is a manufacturer releasing a new GPU in 2023. Doesn't matter if it's supposed to be a quote-unquote mainstream card, it really should be coming out with specs that will allow the user to max out games at 1080p for a while. If things change a couple years down the road, then that's fine, it's just the way it goes, but to sell a card in today's market and make the user turn down settings, it just doesn't seem appealing to me. On top of that, just like how the RTX 4070 broke the tradition of delivering previous gen flagship performance to the mid-range market, this 4060 Ti will not be offering performance that made the 3060 Ti appealing. From the specs, it's pretty easy to tell that this GPU is most likely going to be sitting in between an RTX 3070 and 3070 Ti, which is a terrible leap gen on gen considering the 3060 Ti wasn't even that far away from the 3070, especially when you overclocked it. This then leads to further disappointment because if the 4060 Ti isn't going to be impressive, you can bet your FPS that the 4060 non-Ti is also going to be a major disappointment. This GPU isn't going to be that much faster than an RTX 3060 Ti. It may not even be faster at all, but in terms of pricing, it'll probably be around the same. You can see how as you go further down the stack, the performance improvement gets worse. The RTX 4090, great card, but super expensive. The 4080, good performance as well, but it just costs an exorbitant amount relative to previous gen X80 GPUs. Had it come out at $799 or even $849, I think most people would have been fine with it. The 4070 Ti, however, it really should have been called an RTX 4070 and should have sold for around $500, and the 4070 is what the 4060 Ti should have been. Along with that, they also should have gotten a major memory configuration bump. The 4060 should be launching with 12GB minimum, and the 4070s should have come out with 16GB. There should not be any GPUs in 2023 with less than 10GB of VRAM unless it's less than $200. Remember, we used to have $170 8GB RX 470s back in 2016. We really should have established 16GB of VRAM for the mainstream level by now, but instead we're stuck with lower end configurations and the prices just keep going up. What Nvidia is doing here is the same thing that food manufacturers and grocery stores are indulging in. It's called shrinkflation. I'm sure most of you guys have seen the pictures online where someone posts a picture of a can of soup that they bought from their local grocery store a year ago, but when they go to buy it today, not only are they getting a lesser amount, but it's also gone up in price. When you were originally paying $2.80 for a 575 milliliter can of soup, you're now paying $3.27 for a 515 milliliter can of soup. So for those who are defending the RTX 4070 or 4060 because inflation and prices are going up everywhere, it's not just that prices have gone up, but you're getting less for your money. The hardware is just not at that appropriate level. This is why nobody is excited for these graphics cards, and why they will continue to sit on store shelves until Nvidia either drops the prices or stock for used or previous generation hardware dries up and people are left with no other choice. It'll be interesting to see how things play out in a year from now. Just what will the Steam hardware survey look like? I think that these 4060 cards may not even break the top 10 spots, and people will continue to use their previous gen cards, the lower settings, and hey, with the use of tech like FSR, which can help breathe some more life into this older hardware, people are in no rush to upgrade. But I just really wanted to drive this point home because if you thought that with the RTX 4070 the worst has passed us, well, unfortunately it seems like Nvidia isn't quite done yet. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.